They thought they could erase a century of history with a single forged signature. Overnight, a proud black rancher's 1,500 acres, land his family had worked for generations, vanished from his name, sold off by the very people sworn to protect the community. But they didn't know the man they were stealing from. Deep in his father's dusty files lay a weapon they never saw coming, one that would turn their scheme into their downfall. What happens when the people who steal your home end up losing theirs?
For Calvin Rourke, the land wasn't just dirt and grass. It was blood, memory, and the heartbeat of his family's legacy. His great-grandfather had carved this ranch out of the Texas wilderness, fighting droughts, storms, and prejudice to keep it alive. Calvin had grown up riding horses at sunrise, mending fences by hand, and watching his father's weathered hands guide the plow through the earth. Life here was quiet but full. Early mornings tending cattle, evenings on the porch watching the sky turn from gold to deep purple. The neighbors knew Calvin as the man who never missed a helping hand, who'd share his tools, his time, and even his harvest. His land was more than property. It was a promise passed down through generations. But not everyone saw it that way. In the growing subdivision nearby, the local homeowners association viewed Calvin's ranch as prime real estate, an untapped gold mine for their own gain. They didn't care about the history, the sweat, or the graves of Calvin's ancestors on that soil. To them, it was just land waiting to be claimed. And soon, they would set their plan in motion, a plan Calvin never saw coming until it was almost too late.
It started with strange letters in the mail. At first, Calvin thought they were just misaddressed notices, vague warnings about unpaid assessments and community compliance fees for a neighborhood he didn't even live in. He tossed them aside, but they kept coming, each one more threatening than the last. Then came the phone calls. A curt woman claiming to be from the HOA informed him that his membership dues were years overdue, over $14,000 according to their records. Calvin laughed at the absurdity. His ranch wasn't part of any HOA. But the woman didn't laugh. Instead, she warned him that failure to pay could result in enforcement actions, including liens and forced sale of property. Weeks later, while returning from the feed store, Calvin spotted something that made his stomach knot. A "for sale" sign hammered into the edge of his land. Beneath it, in bold letters, was the name of a local real estate agency known for flipping rural properties into luxury developments. Panic turned to fury as Calvin dug deeper. The county records showed a shocking entry. According to a recently filed deed transfer, his 1,500 acres no longer belonged to him. The HOA had claimed ownership through a legal loophole, citing unpaid fees and a default judgment he knew nothing about. The signature on the paperwork wasn't his, but it was close enough to pass under a lazy clerk's eyes. Calvin's calls to the HOA were unanswered. The sheriff's office said it was a civil matter. And when he tried to meet with the county clerk, he was told the transfer had been processed and the land legally sold. That night, sitting at his kitchen table under a single dim bulb, Calvin felt the weight of generations pressing down on him. Every fence post, every corral, every grain silo, stolen with a pen stroke. He could feel his father's voice in the back of his mind, urging him not to give in. And when he opened an old filing cabinet buried under decades of dust, his eyes fell on something that made his pulse race. It was a brittle, yellowed envelope marked Deed 1903. Inside was a document his father had once told him about, but never shown. A legal covenant written before the HOA even existed, granting the Rourke family certain rights over the land that no sale could erase. And with that, Calvin realized they might have started this fight, but he was going to finish it. Calvin didn't go to the police. He didn't beg the HOA for mercy. Instead, he drove straight to the best property lawyer in the county, an old friend of his father who owed the Rourke family more than a few favors. When Calvin laid the original 1903 deed on the lawyer's desk, the man's eyes widened. This wasn't just a title, it was a legal fortress. Within days, a lawsuit was filed, not just against the HOA, but against every board member personally. The document claimed fraudulent transfer of property, unlawful seizure, and willful violation of a century-old covenant. It demanded immediate return of the land, damages for lost income, and, in a bold move, liquidation of HOA-owned homes to be auctioned off, with proceeds paid directly to Calvin for damages. As the gavel fell, Calvin didn't smile. He just stood there, hat in hand, staring at the people who had tried to strip him of his family's legacy, the same people who now face losing theirs. And as he walked out of that courtroom, one thought burned in his mind. This wasn't just about winning. It was about making sure they never forgot who they tried to take down.
The auction took place under a blistering Texas sun. Calvin didn't attend to gloat. He stayed on his porch, the same spot where he had once opened that letter that threatened to erase his life's work. One by one, the HOA-owned homes were sold off, their profits wired directly into his account. The same people who had tried to push him out were now packing moving boxes, their futures uncertain. Calvin didn't celebrate their hardship, but he didn't pity them either. They had counted on his silence, his compliance, on the old lie that a black man in rural Texas would have no way to fight back. They were wrong. With the settlement money, Calvin restored every inch of his land. New fences, repaired barns, fresh grazing fields. But more importantly, he set aside part of his winnings to establish a legal fund for other black landowners facing similar threats. Too many had lost their family property through quiet fraud, legal loopholes, or pure intimidation. Calvin's victory proved those battles could be won. The story spread far beyond Texas. Civil rights groups called it a landmark case in property rights and racial justice. Newspapers across the country told the tale of the rancher who turned the law against his oppressors. Calvin's name became a quiet symbol of something bigger than revenge, a reminder that history is written by those who refuse to be erased. Standing at the edge of his land at sunset, Calvin looked across the fields, the golden light spilling over the grass. His father's words echoed in his mind. You take care of the land, and the land will take care of you. Because in the end, it wasn't just about acres. It was about legacy. And sometimes the only way to protect it is to make sure no one forgets how close they came to losing it.